When are we going to start establishing rules and standards for new media?
Absolutely.
It's been quite a long time now.
Yeah.
Enough time for us to actually review, all the new media films that have come out and come up with a standard.
Yep. Because here's how it mirrors if you're not tracking with what I was talking about with the old 1948 Supreme Court ruling and then what's going on today. It's like modern day block booking, like what they're doing with everything else. They're putting it back on the theaters. Like, hey theaters, we know that you're a distribution. You have your own distribution, but it's like, oh, but it's different than ours because we're doing streaming. We're not owning theaters, so we're still under that standard of the 1948 ruling. But we have this new thing called streaming, and you guys can go just kick rocks. And we're just going to give you the movies that we feel we want to give you because we're going to bank on our own platform. That's essentially exactly the same thing what they did back in the 1900s, early 1900s.
Well, then where does that leave like the indie companies, the indie filmmakers?
Yeah, that's another. And that kind of circling back to the theaters too. Their complaint was that they added a certain level of prestige, which is true. A lot of especially indie filmmakers, like if you can get theatrical distribution for a good amount of time. Even the PR alone, even if it's just like a few days, even if like it's under a week, you can still say released in select theaters and put your PR at that. It raises the level of awareness and prestige for a film when you're distributing, let's say, other streaming platforms or TV. It gives you essentially like selling power, for all these platforms, for whether it be TV, whether it be streaming, for be any other avenue of distribution, purely based off of having a theatrical release, spending money to that, and a lot of times they will eat that cost. Was it like Blair Witch? They had $12,000 for production. I don't know if that included distro or paying for select theater releases, but it definitely, I'm pretty sure that it also paid for PR.
Right. Well, just because COVID hit last year and all the theaters have been down, it just makes me think about are and when they're going to be opening up, and how that is, again, how is that going to affect the indie companies? Are they only going to be playing select few? Like before they were, but even now more so, they need to recoup what they've lost over the past year. So would they only be playing, big tentpole movies?
And that's the thing. It's like they were already circumventing that. Like what was the movie? It was an animation, Soul. Alright, Soul is considered a tentpole movie based off of, it's a Pixar film, right? And then it had massive success on the platform, but there's no theatrical release on it. Again, that licensing out to, say if they license out to other streaming platforms, they're not doing it for theaters. Again, that's modern day block booking. You guys get only the ones that we tell you can get. It's no longer, hey, it's a tentpole, it comes to us first, to the movie theaters first. It's whatever we tell you to do. And that is a dangerous, slippery slope, which repeats.
Granted, you can still go to the studios and try to get your movie in, but then at that point, you're kind of selling that to them.
Yeah.
Versus working with them. Because a lot of these studios, when you do sell to them, they kind of, in some of the contracts and in some of the wording, they kind of have an exclusive contract with your body of work, with the film that you submit to them. And at that point, you kind of lose a lot of control and you lose the percentage of profit that you could be making off of it because of that. Because a lot of them deal in flat fees. So.
Yeah, well, that might be different depending on which studio you're going through. And you're talking about a studio buying out to distribute to their channels versus just going to a distributor yourself.
It would have to be a new...
I mean, okay, so that's another thing when you're selling films. There's so many different avenues for distribution. You could sell it to a company like a bigger studio. That's the thing is, unless you already have the track record to make bigger films like that, and they already know your work and they're interested in your work, and you're making these deals to make that, they won't necessarily buy it per se unless you've already got that track record and it shows success on it. So it's a little...
it's wishy-washy.
It is kind of wishy-washy, but there's so many different avenues that you can take with it. So I get what you're trying to say with that, but it's not necessarily in terms of like the studio as much as it is for like distributors, right? It's kind of like after the fact.
But if the studios become the distributor,
yes,
I think it's where I'm referencing is that the studios do become the distributor,
which they
you could work with them.
Yep.
But at that point, you're relinquishing, depending on the deal that you get with them, you would relinquish a lot of your rights for that film.
Absolutely. Knowing,
just based off the contracts that I've seen already, when you're trying to sell off of, say, Amazon or any other streaming platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the wording is just like you kind of lose a lot of those rights for your film.
Yeah.
You guys would have to go in and read that for yourself to actually come to those conclusions.
Or get a media lawyer.
Entertainment lawyer.
Yeah. Who really knows what they're doing to understand the contracts that you are signing.
You should always get an entertainment lawyer. I'm just saying, like, if you wanted to review it on your own, you know, it's a lot of lawyer speak. It's all about how you talk, how you phrase things, what words you use, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So really take a look at it, and if you're interested in that stuff, or just leave that to your entertainment lawyer. It's good to know off the top of your head, though, as a producer.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, you don't have to know everything, but just enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So besides that, like, again, this is why it's such, you know, a weird thing that nobody's actually talking about this, is because, again, instead of these studios owning theaters, which is like, oh, that's why it's not a monopoly, it's theaters, but they're effectively trying to block them out from showing content. I remember there's another article I had posted about that. Again, I've written about a lot of this stuff on Film Jammer, and it was like, oh, well, they're not just giving them...
What's Film Jammer?
Oh, Film Jammer, that's our news aggregate site. We mostly repost news from different news outlets for that. And then we also have a blog that we do post up some of our own stuff. More the things that we've written. Some reviews, but mostly just like some of the power moves. And we do that blog every once in a while, so it's not... It needs to build, is what it needs to do. I need to just start writing more on it, too. That's what Film Jammer is.
That we do.
Yeah, that's true. And anyway, but I posted that article on there, and it literally it shows a timeline of what happened. So if you are interested in that, maybe I'll throw a link down there, or just find my other one of the what Hollywood doesn't want.
Comments below. Comments below.
Yeah. But I did that on the other video that I made about Hollywood doesn't want you to know this, because they don't. Because why would they want you to understand this as a creator, or creators like us, to go, hey, by the way, you're kind of screwing us over. You know, why would they want to know that? Because they're making money hand over fist, because everyone's stuck inside here, you know, stuck at home, being locked down, and paying for these subscriptions, and just feeding to it. What?
I don't know if I should bring this up.
What?
I'm just like, are you saying it's kind of like the whole GameStop stuff? Where it's like, we'll just let that one go. It just kind of popped in my head.
Yeah. But yes, it is essentially that. And taking money away from, say, like independents, because now it's only the big studios. Again, why this is such a dangerous thing, and why indie filmmakers need to be upset about this and banding together the same way is we're getting the short end of the stick. Because by the time when it comes down to it, and your only distribution avenues cut off from movie theaters, again, it costs money to do that. But it costs money to do that to gain prestige so you can sell better. Now what happens when you lower that selling power that you got? How you're going to have to bend down and bow down to all these studios to go, yes, please take that. I will do whatever I can. And their contracts, even for their actors, are ridiculous. They're absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if you remember that article I posted about the Marvel actors, the people that acted in Marvel movies.
Explain it.
Okay, so there was an article that I came across, and it was talking about how these contracts that they make Marvel actors and actresses sign are just way out of line. I mean, I get the whole physicality for it. You got to stay in shape. You got to stay healthy. Fine. But they went as far to say, like, well, now you have to show, under a contract, you have to do certain things in real life to show and exemplify your hero's persona. you have to be that hero, not only by acting like good people, but you also have to, and it was literally built into their contracts, you have to attend certain benefits that we approve and tell you have to be there. Under contract, they have to go to these benefits, these fundraisers, whether or not they agreed with the policies or not. They have to by contract, and I kind of feel like that's a little bit BS there. I mean, why, forget having free thought or anything like that, or being able to have your own opinion, which that was another thing. The whole realities are, thought police thing that's totally different. It's all in the political realm. Thing. That's in the political realm, but that is technically relevant because now you've got a lot of the tech companies getting involved with this too, talking about it. But once the tech companies transition to having those sort of restrictions, I guess, to put it lightly, they're having those sort of restrictions. Guess what gets hit as well? Entertainment and tech are the two biggest industries in California. That's what made California the fifth biggest economy in the world. King Kong? Yeah, if they were all fighting on the same side to destroy humanity, sure. That's not what it is. But
the little guy?
Yeah, we are the little guy.
Don't worry about that little guy.
Yeah. Pay no attention to the big corporations behind the curtain. It's like, but that's essentially what it is. This is why it's completely, to me, it's a bit asinine to think that more indie filmmakers are waking up to this, but not enough, not yet, and that's why we wanted to discuss that. Oh, I don't know what you're doing on there.
I'm hopping on Instagram.
Yeah, okay. You like to do that. That's fine.
I think we like.
That's fine. Yeah, alright. Anyway, but it did start with Trolls World Tour, even though the steps were already being put into place by Disney, by AT&T, or any of these other ones that, other streaming companies that started to build around 2016, 2017. So, I mean, there were already plans to do that regardless, but yeah, that's been a big one, of why it came out. And then with the pandemic, with everything shutting down and locking down, it just created those grounds to go, okay, now we can do it and forget everybody else. Don't worry about that. And like you said, it's very similar to the GameStop, the GameStop thing where they're like, oh, let's just shut it down, let's short sell it, and yeah. Who cares about everybody else? Because as long as the rich get richer, what does it matter? Same thing with the studios. Why is nobody talking about the studios? Everyone keeps talking about these technological oligarchies, and it's like, why is nobody talking about the studios? They've been doing they've been making these exact moves to vertically integrate for years now.
Well, what if they because they know that history, that they're just slowly tiptoeing around it?
Yeah, they're not tiptoeing anymore.
Take advantage of it.
They tiptoed around it earlier on. They did tiptoe around it earlier on because they were trying to see who was going to hit Netflix, because Netflix was the first.
Right.
They're like, hey, doesn't that violate antitrust law? Doesn't the Sherman Antitrust Act? And then they were like, oh, wait, nobody's hitting that. Hey, wait. Now they're winning awards and taking out, taking Best Picture and our own awards for this. Why are they not getting hit? All right, you know what? We're going to counteract that. We're going to build our own streaming services, and that's where they went with it.
Well, they want a piece of that cake too.
Yeah.
But the thing is, as soon as they get on it, because it's such big corporations, it'll be easy for them to just kind of.
Well, they have the capital.
Super
They have the capital. They have the tech.
Everything.
Yeah, they have the capital and they have the tech.
Century 20.
Yeah.
Fox.
Oh, so, again, how nobody can see this, it's ridiculous. Just seeing how many, it's essentially cannibalism, corporate cannibalism. Eating up all these companies to gain more power under themselves so that they can make these power moves to do things like re-monopolize the film industry. Again, that might seem like a big claim. However, if you look at the history of filmmaking, if you look at the history of why it's separated between the studios and the theaters, and it has to do with the distribution chains, and if you look back with block booking and how it was actually done, it is essentially the exact same thing of what's going on now, except that theaters don't have streaming, and I know you can argue with that with like with services like Fandango, which technically,
but it's like a third party though.
It's still a third party, and now another move that they took, another move that Disney took away from everyone was, again, I think it was back in October, November, they stopped producing and licensing out for DVDs and Blu-ray. So anybody else that was doing sales for hard media, they took that away. They took that away. They were like, no, we just base it off of what sales are and how well they do it. Dude, that's a catch-all BS that even Amazon does to shadow ban certain films because they don't agree with them. Oh, no, it's just based off of algorithms. Like, you realize even films that aren't available, you can still search. So why wouldn't certain films be in the search? That doesn't make any sense. And now it becomes more of a political way. Yeah.
You know, why are they being pushed to the bottom of the bottom? You know?
Yeah, but this thing, they're not just being pushed to the bottom of the bottom. They're just gone. Like, you don't see them anymore at all. So, again, it's so ridiculous to think of this because and this is the thing too. People usually see it in ways of, well, how would I act if I owned a big company? You know, and it's like, no, they're not doing anything bad. At the same time, this has massive ramifications towards the film industry, especially indies, especially movie theaters. And why movie theaters are trying to now bow down to these big corporations like Disney or Warner Brothers or Universal, as in they made that deal, AMC reneged on that whole, like, hey, we're no longer going to play Universal movies. And they're like, you know what, instead of the 90-day, we're going to give you 30-day. I'm like, how are you going to recoup cost anyway for something like that? And then now you've got Warner Brothers going out doing same-day releases. Like, movie theaters are going to shut down even further.
Warner Brothers is going ahead doing their little shady thing, you know?
Yeah. So, again, it's like, this doesn't make sense for this. Why would you do a 30-day window, which I think it dropped down now to 17 days?
Yeah, what's the point of doing that? I mean, I get theatrical release. It's supposed to gain more audience and views, just so that when you do release it through SVOD or TVOD, that people will go and buy it if they saw it in theater, if they heard the hype about it from the theater.
Mm-hmm.
But I
know.
I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, and that's a whole other deal too. It's when you go to streaming and say like you eliminate physical media, you're not buying that film. You are buying a license of that film. And that's why you're able to stream it only through their platform. They own it all. They want to own you, and they want to own all your content, so they can just continue to get richer and richer and richer. And I think that's BS. It's like,
that's how to the little guy.
Yeah, and again, why more independent filmmakers and even movie theaters aren't getting more?
Why are they struggling? Mad at this? Right. They're struggling so hard right now to get their films distributed or, like, to make their return on investment, right? And it's just, where are those platforms where indies can thrive?
Yep.
That will work with the indie.
Yep.
You know?
Because I think I mentioned this before, Netflix, even Netflix itself, a lot of these streaming platforms for the distro, for indies, is all flat fees. You know? I think Netflix caps out at, like, $12K. So if you spent anything more than $12K on that, you are not recouping it. Because say if Netflix is the only one to bite out of any of the stream platforms, the bigger stream platforms out there, how are you going to recoup your costs?
And then it's like, if it does do well on the platform, sometimes they'll give you the option to renegotiate.
Correct. But they won't ever do that off of views.
Right.
Because it's all proprietary information and data that they keep, and they keep skewing, going, no, look, we just do it from wherever. And guess what? Your distribution on Netflix is going to be, especially if you're in the U.S., is going to purely be in the U.S. You probably won't get international distro, but I'd have to go and check their
They do
their
international.
They do that, but
you can negotiate it. You can still do international through Netflix. I think it depends on the contract.
It does depend on the contract.
Again, that goes back to who is your, what is it? Because there's the distribution channel, and then there's a distributor, like is it aggregator?
Distributor,
like
yeah,
middleman, like
it depends.
Brubaker, right?
Yeah, Brubaker. He does.
Connects you with the person who distributes the film.
That's an aggregator. Yeah, so they aggregators are essentially groups or companies that gather a bunch of films and redirect to distributors or distributing companies, so then you can actually get distributed. So, and then the other side is that they actually do help with people to get distributed on those, so you can work with their people, so instead of them taking that to do it for you, they can show you how to do it, and so it's still technically like a third party going into there. But yeah, that's a whole other aspect of it. Hey, thanks for checking out my video on here. If you like the content that I'm putting out, please be sure to like and subscribe down below and add a comment, because I'd love to see what your guys' thoughts are on this sort of content and these topics that I'm putting out there. Alright, until next time, stay golden.